So we're going to start now.
Sure.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our fifth session on the Transboundary Water series, hosted by the Women in Law Initiative in Pakistan and curated by myself. Once again, I would like to thank the Women in Law Initiative for providing a platform for us to have these conversations that are critical in the current geopolitical landscape. Our session today is titled Digital Currents, AI, and the Future of Water Governance. Artificial intelligence is rapidly transforming the way governments, institutions, and communities collect data, predict water risks, manage infrastructure, and make decisions about shared water resources. From drought forecasting and flood prediction to real time monitoring of river basins and water distribution systems, digital technologies are reshaping the future of water governance. At the same time that AI is transforming industries and accelerating innovation, this process is coming at a significant environmental cost. This session will explore both the opportunities and challenges that artificial intelligence presents for water governance. It will examine how AI can enhance water management, support evidence based policymaking, and strengthen transboundary water cooperation. With that introduction, I would like to introduce our speaker for this session. Our speaker for this session is Dr. Aneel Salman. Dr. Salman holds the distinguished OGDCL IPRI Chair of Economic Security at the Islamabad Policy Research Institute in Pakistan. He was the chair of the National AI Policy Committee at the Ministry of Information Technology and Telecommunication at the Government of Pakistan. As a leading international economist, he specializes in blue diplomacy, leadership, transnational trade dynamics, strategy driven policy formulation, and the multifaceted challenges of climate change. Internationally, he has been affiliated with the Rensselaer University, Harvard University, Cambridge University, and the University of Bern in Switzerland, among many others. He is a visiting professor at Institute Superieur d'Economique University de Sofia Antipolis in France and the Tsinghua University in Beijing. His high impact research has been widely recognized and adopted, influencing strategic planning and policy making across various sectors and organizations in Pakistan. Beyond his academic prowess, Dr. Salman is a master trainer, having imparted his expertise to bureaucrats, law enforcement agencies, military personnel, diplomats, and other key stakeholders, furthering the cause of informed economic decision making and resilience. And on another level, Dr. Salman has also been a colleague and a mentor to me. So this session is extremely special for that purpose to me as well. Thank you, Dr. Salman, for joining us today. Dr. Aneel, you have spearheaded the drafting of Pakistan's national artificial intelligence policy. So my first question to would be that from your perspective, how do you see AI transforming the way governments approach water governance over the coming decade on a very broad and general level?
Uh, Assalamu alaikum and thank you, Maham. Good to see you in other part of the world and happy that you are, mashallah, progressing and busy with your work. Pakistan is the fourth country in South Asia with this national AI policy. And we already have the national water policy in 2018, the national AI policy in 2025. Now let's see that how do we sync the two policies and how do we see that given the artificial intelligence and call it a wave, call it a fad, because what I have felt that sometimes without understanding, we feel that every sphere or every place, artificial intelligence is going to play an important part. But no, not that I'm saying that in water governance it's not. It is definitely going to play a very important and I'm using the word transformative role from reactive administration to anticipatory governance. You see that when we look at the conventional water institutions, they are still operating on the periodic measurements, on historical averages, manual reporting, and sector specific planning. What AI actually allows the government to integrate the continuous observations from hydrometeorological stations, river gauges, groundwater monitoring, smart meters, satellite observations, and the climate models. And it can give you an updated estimates about the current conditions and even predict the future conditions. So that is the first one, the transformation from reactive administration to the anticipatory one. The second one that I can think of, it's basically that we will be shifting from the measurement of individual assets to system-wide water accounting. You see that machine learning research is increasingly, it combines the remote sensing, number one, the hydrological data, and the operational information to infer that the variables which were difficult to measure directly at first. So that actually helps us. Now, looking into the third transformation that I can think of, it would be rather that earlier we were doing the probabilistic, we were doing the planning in terms of the probability. But now what happens is that we will be doing the deterministic planning because of this AI. Now, water systems, over the years, what we have seen, it is gradually becoming more difficult to manage from historical averages because the precipitation, the droughts, the snow melt, and this increasing frequency of floods is becoming very frequent and they're very much variable. What AI can do that it can actually generate these probability distributions rather than giving you a single variable. And the last or the fourth transformation that I would say that we will be shifting towards digital twins and continuously updated infrastructure management. You see that a digital twin is a computational representation of a real physical system that is continuously informed by the operational data. And for water utilities, this can support the leak detection, the pump optimization, like we have the pressure management and predictive maintenance. So the last emerging trend comes to that we can have the development of the AI co-pilots for the technical staff. Now, research is actually moving beyond the single purpose forecasting models towards systems that combine the language models, the domain data, workflow tools, and hydrological knowledge. So, therefore, this systems can actually help in terms of how the complex database is going to converse and what kind of hydrological data gets retrieved as an evidence, and it will help in terms of our decision support system.
Thank you, Dr. Aneel. That's a very comprehensive lay of the land of how the future policy making is going to be impacted by AI. Another question I had was something that a lot of people have asked us as well, particularly in this series, is the fact that climate change is becoming a huge issue now. And climate change is making droughts, floods, and water scarcity particularly more frequent. Women are also concerned about it because women are more adversely impacted by climate change and water scarcity because of their vulnerabilities. So, how can AI help governments and water managers better anticipate and respond to these challenges? Like, for instance, where do you see AI having the greatest potential to improve decision making and resource management?
Okay, so you're very right that climate change is not something that is going to affect one sector or one gender. Everyone is impacted by that. But I always give an example, which you rightly said, that women in particularly are the first responders or are the first affectees of climate change. That's why we still say that it's the mother nature, not the father. And I see that there are five basic areas where we can look into that how the governments or the water managers can actually respond to these water challenges. So the first where you can see the application of AI is basically the flood and the drought anticipation. You can see that in 2022, Pakistan became the victim of these floods, and we had the $30 billion dollars damage. And we are still recovering out of it. Last year it was a 3 billion, and now again this year we have these rains coming in. But so far it has not been a flood situation, but obviously it affects the livelihood and the women particularly. So when I look at the application where the decision making becomes better, it's basically how we can predict the flood and drought anticipation. What is the role of AI into it? That you can integrate the precipitation forecasts, stream flow, the soil moisture, the snow information, and the satellite observation in up to date. As I said, it's more of a probability based warnings. And we can take a proactive action in terms of such anticipations. So, looking at the second area where we can actually uh, see that there will be an intelligent decision making, that is that Pakistan, still every book says it's agrarian economy, but the contribution of agriculture in Pakistan economy is approximately 20%. And around 20, 30 years back, this is the same agriculture sector which was contributing around 45, 42%. So there's a drastic reduction. So what AI can do is that we can improve the agricultural water productivity. You can estimate that what is your crop type. You can see that what is the evapotranspiration rate, the soil moisturize, and the irrigation demand, stress using the satellite and the field data. And then we can optimize our irrigation schedules given this data. And as I said, that AI can actually do it as a wholesome job rather than looking into certain sectors or looking into certain data parameter. The third area is basically after the agricultural water is the groundwater management. You can combine all this information. You can use remote sensing, land use, rainfall extraction proxies. And what we can do is that how we can look into that what is the depletion and the quality risks. Now, this actually helps you to shift your groundwater policy from responding to exhausted aquifers towards early intervention. And as I mentioned, that rather being reactive, we can be proactive. So it's not just this, you can actually, the third one is basically the urban water and infrastructure. You can detect that where are the abnormal flows, where are the pipe failures, you can forecast the demand and optimize that where the target maintenance or pumping is required. And the last one is basically an important one, that is the basin planning and allocation. You can run thousands of alternative reservoir, drought cropping and allocation scenarios rapidly, and then you can see that okay where that planning is needed. So I can think that Pakistan's water accounting and agriculture productivity should probably be the first national priority. And if we can look into these five areas, the second one is what we are suffering is your institutional early warning. That you see that AI not just talk about the that when the what is the probability of these floods or droughts, but it can actually forecast that when the or how the problems can be turned into the solutions, right? And there can be a governance dashboard, and when any problem comes, how the institutions can respond towards it, because now you have ample of data and you have different scenarios, and what scenario is probably the best one, this is where the institutions can come in. So it's not just about data, it's about that how the institutions also respond to it, and that's also mentioned in our national AI policy too.
Thank you, Dr. Aneel. So, when you talk about the fact that we need to include AI into existing, like integrate it into existing technologies for agricultural productivity, groundwater monitoring, and the very, very important role of institutions and governance in this, the issue that raises with that is also of unequal access to technology and data then. And in that situation, how can governments ensure that AI driven water governance and in governance in general as well benefits developing countries and vulnerable communities rather than widening existing inequalities, which a lot of social theorists are now talking about that AI is going to end up doing?
Okay, you are absolutely right when you ask this question that we do have apprehensions that with this uh, AI ecosystem coming in, is it further going to widen the gap or it is going to bring more inclusivity? If you look at the national AI policy of Pakistan, yes, one of the core visions or the core objective is that, okay, we want to have an inclusive development. And when we were making the policy, the one of the questions that we asked every stakeholder that why and why do you need an AI policy for Pakistan and what would be the benefit of it? So the first response would be was that okay, to reduce the gap, to make sure that everyone has a level playing ground and everyone has an access to this technology. What we have seen in the real life, that is technology biased or is technology creates these favors certain gender or it creates inequalities. Well, there are always such things. You would see that in the real world, theory and practice, they totally they most of the times they differ from each other and we have to take corrective actions. So there are certain principles that we have to follow in order to reduce this inequality, in order to say that this and I don't say AI as a technology. I say AI is more of an ecosystem that improves the governance, that brings efficiency, and it's a personal choice, it's an economic choice. It's not a technological, uh, by force, people are not saying that you have to use AI. So it's an economic decision because it makes your processes agile. Now, the first one is that you have to digitize the water rights. And digitizing doesn't mean that you are talking about the existing exclusion. Poor communities, your informal settlements, women, smallholders, your these remote communities, they often have a very weak digital representation. But if you make an AI system that learn primarily from locations with sophisticated meters, reliable connectivity, and complete administrative records, the people least visible in the data can become least visible in the policy. So we have to make sure that when you are developing that ecosystem, you don't take the ideal conditions, you bring everyone on board. And to be very frank, this is not a hypothetical governance problem. Like if you read one of the UNESCO's work, they also talks about that AI system depends upon the large scale, high quality measurements that and that data sets may fail to represent the important conditions. So in Pakistan, we have to take care of that. As I said, that in our policy, we have like specifically mentioned that there has to be inclusivity. Number second principle that I want to talk about, that you have to build a public digital water infrastructure rather than an isolated proprietary system. Then there has to be an explicitly finance the data poor areas. We should not ignore it. Third, you have to preserve a low technology access channels. For example, I'll tell you that a farmer should not lose eligibility for irrigation services because he lacks a smartphone. And we have made such scenarios where we have made it mandatory that, okay, if you have the system, then you are eligible for such benefits. So you can actually talk about that. You have to see that there are measure distributional outcomes, not just the system efficiency. And this is the problem that we have been doing. Whenever we apply AI, we are just measuring the system efficiency. And the fifth one, you have to build the domestic institutional capacity. What we have done, or what the pattern is, that we borrow and foreign technology, we do not customize it, and we try to implement the way it has been implemented in other areas. So what I personally tell these AI enthusiasts that, okay, first and the foremost, you have to develop the domestic institutional capacity, and then you need to compete, or then you need to customize these models. So I think if you look out for this kind of structure, then at least things can get better. You can actually reduce the gap. And when we talk about the vulnerables, when we talk about the poor communities, when we talk about women who are marginalized, not in terms of finance, but in terms of the technology, I think such interventions can play an important role.
Thank you, Dr. Aneel. So, I think it's very interesting that you've spoken about how increasingly relying on AI to inform public policy is going to take place and the benefits of doing so, while at the same time, the measures that should be in place to make it more inclusive. But Dr. Neil, at the same time, we can't say that there are no risks of using AI. So, according to you, what are the biggest risks of relying too heavily on AI in decisions relating to policy making, particularly on water allocation, infrastructure, and resource management? And where do you think human judgment remains indispensable? Because we are seeing situations where decision making is just being done through AI chatbots now.
Right. So when we are talking, or let me just rephrase, when we romanticize artificial intelligence, there is also a dark side also. And if you ask me a short answer that, okay, where that human judgment, which step it comes, I think the human judgment should stay from step one till step n. So you should not give everything to the machine. And right now, I think the biggest danger, or the biggest central flaw, I feel, that is the false objectivity. And if I go a little beyond than that, right now, the way humans are behaving, so I don't trust Maham when I'm asking her something. I trust that AI agent, because I think that at one point of time, I used to have the peer opinions and I used to value it. But now these AI agents have uh, transformed, or they have channeled my behavior in such a way that I trust them in terms of giving them a very specific command, and they give me one answer and I blindly trust it. So that is one thing about the false objectivity. Some of the major risks in terms of the water, I think number one is having the biased and the incomplete data. Areas which have very few gauges or meters, may appear to have low demand or lower risk because they are poorly observed. Doesn't mean that it is like that. But because of that data set that we are collecting, that is giving you that impression. Number two that I can say is the climate non-stationarity. Like you see that all these models that we develop, may it be climate model or the water model, they are trained on the historical data. They are trained on the historical relationships. As the current scenarios, as I said, that now the frequency of floods, now the frequency of these rains, now the changes in which the way environment is responding, I doubt that the historical models can give you the right kind of projection. So we need to bring more refinement in our models, just other than relying on the historical data and thinking that okay, climate has a stationary data, so it has to be climate non-stationarity. The third one is basically the black box optimization. What is black box optimization? So you have an algorithm and it just maximizes the output that it is giving you, that it gives you a maximized aggregate efficiency. While what happens to the tail end farmer, he is at disadvantage. The low income users are going to be at disadvantage because it is just looking at the aggregate, it is just looking at the averages. And the last one, may be the automatic bias. What is the automatic bias? It's basically that the government or the experts may defer to a model because challenging it appears to be less scientific. So you need a human intervention. You need to have that, okay, whether you want to trust that algorithm blindly or you want to use some human logic when you're looking at the variables and the results that are giving. You see that we have a natural, we call it as the natural confirmation bias, that if a computer is doing it, so the probability of having error is very less. But what I have seen, and when we run the data, when we run these regressions, when we run these models, the models can give you wrong outcomes also. You have to understand that, okay, it's not the ultimate one. Yes, they do give you an estimates, they give you the probabilities, but we need to have this a human judgment also. There can be cyber and the operational risk. Your data can be compromised. Your sensors or models might be having certain distortions in which the data that is being collected that has some errors. So until and unless you don't look at the data that okay, how it is being collected, what kind of numbers are coming, that can also be one of the problems. A very important aspect where you need human judgment, that is the privacy. This privacy and surveillance, you are collecting all the household data, and one of the things is that if you understand data, it can actually reveal how the family is behaving, how the households are behaving, what is their production activity. Now that is that where do we draw the line, that okay, is it just the data collection or you are actually invading the privacy of people? And I think it's the false precision, that you can actually say that that okay, your precision level is just 2%, 3%, but it may be actually more than that. So just trusting that trust that you have though on those machines, I think you need to look out for your own judgment. So therefore, in short, your human judgment always remain indispensable. Whenever there's a water decision changes, it rights. So the decision that you're taking, it is over on the rights, it may be on the entitlements, it may be on the safety, it may be on the public investments. So just completely relying on these AI models, I think that is not advisable. So you need that human intervention, you need that human judgment at every stage.
Thank you, Dr. Aneel. Particularly, I think with when you talk about women, the privacy angle is very, very important as well, because we've already seen a number of situations where women become even more vulnerable because of being exposed to data breaches. Dr. Neil, moving on to some conversation on Pakistan in particular. So, as you spoke about earlier, that Pakistan has no shortage of water policies, yet implementation remains a persistent challenge, in which you spoke a bit about the governance challenge that we face as well. So, how my question is that how can artificial intelligence support better decision making and improve institutional coordination, particularly in addressing issues that Pakistan faces because of water scarcity?
Okay. So first of all, let me tell you from the policy perspective. You're absolutely right. We have one water policy, right? And the first water policy and the last one came in 2018. So that was the first one. Uh, I did a research and we compared it with the Indian water policy. We did some policy analytics, but the good news is that when we compared the two policies, our policy was very robust. It was very good. So always an A grade for Pakistan policymakers that we make very good policies. The second one is that we have the water security policy. The third one is that we have the national climate change policy. The fourth one is that you have the strategic trade policy framework, the trade policy. And the fifth one that I now think of that the national AI policy. So I'm talking about these four, five policies. One of the biggest problems with the policies is you talk about implementation failure. I move a little bit step further. Implementation might be very good when Maham is on the top because she understands the policy framework, she understands how the policies are to be made, she understood that who are the relevant stakeholders and in which uh, sector or in which part that policy has to be implemented and when it is going to give result, right? But after 6 months, because you're a civil servant or you're a government bureaucrat or you're a politician, so if you're a politician after 5 years, if you're a civil servant after 1 year, depending on, you are out of the organization or you are going somewhere else. So when the new person comes, the policy is not implemented in the same manner. So it is not the implementation failure. Now it is the consistency that we love to have policies and we do have. We want to make them, we want to implement them, but unfortunately, that momentum doesn't continue. And I will always remember, wow, in 2026, when Maham was there, the policy was really good. It gave the desired results. But I think now it's not working. It's not about the implementation, it is about the consistency because we have not applied the policy with the same zeal and zest. That is number one. Number two is that I shared these five policies. So when the national AI policy was made, and I'm not saying that I took account of all these other policies, I actually, uh, what I did was that whatever policies were already made by the Ministry of Information Technologies and Telecom, I made sure that at least the national AI policy is synced with these ministries' policies. Well, I should have stopped over there. I should have actually synced it with the water policy, with other policy, but at a later stage, it should be done. In Pakistan or in other developing countries, one of the reasons why policies don't work or why we have this persistent failure is that we make policies in silos. So when the water policy is being made, we don't take account of the climate policy. And when the climate policy was made, I don't take account of the national food security policy or the water policy. So you have one policy which is saying objective A, you have another policy which is talking about objective B, but interestingly, you will see that the both objectives are conflicting with each other. So instead of having a good ecosystem where the policy can be implemented, what we become victim is a classic policy paralysis. So one policy is not being implemented. The policy is not consistent, but the policy is not giving the desired results, but because it is conflicting with the other policy. So now comes the question that how artificial intelligence or what it is going to make it. So after all this reading over the last 1 year, when we were making this AI policy, I was also part of the national AI policy and the national climate change policy. I think one of the most valuable institutional reform that we can do with reference to water is making a federated Pakistan water intelligence system. I'm not saying that you have to make a giant centralized database. Over here, the word federated is very important. Provinces and agencies could continue owning their own authoritative databases, but there has to be common standards that allows us that the information can be collected, can be retrieved, and they can be combined. I'll give you another macro example that right now we have the national accounts of Pakistan. We do not have the system that we can collect the or we can calculate the GDP of Punjab, GDP of Sindh, GDP of Balochistan separately. And later on, you can just do the total because our provincial accounting systems do not sync with each other. So, again, reiterating, having a federated Pakistan water intelligence system where the data can be they collected, but it can be collected in a standard manner and it can be done. So this system will have, when I'm looking at it, can have several layers. The first layer is basically we have the national accounting, water accounting engine. And what I'm saying is that it can actually calculate, it can actually reconcile what is the river and the canal flows, what are the reservoir changes, rainwater, groundwater estimates, and they can be remotely calculated. Then you can have the seasonal water outlook with that. I have already mentioned in my previous discussion when I was talking about. In this federated one, you can have the agricultural water productivity observatory. Again, I talked about earlier, you can have the groundwater, you can have the important thing that when we talk about the issue of water, we usually our mindset is always on the rural areas. But at the urban level, you can look at the urban utility analytics. You can look out that, okay, what is the demand? What are the forecasts? What are the predictive maintenance things that has to be done? And it can actually improve uh, the areas where in the urban areas where the water you have a problem in terms of the water availability. And the last one, you have to have an implementation dashboard. Implementation dashboard is basically that whether the policies that are being implemented are they giving you the results or not. So the bigger question now comes, okay, these are the interventions or these are the proposed recommendations that how AI can improve the decision making, but the question comes, who is going to do it? So we have in the AI policy, we mentioned that there has to be an AI council. So the National Water Council is basically which has to define that what are the water governance objectives. You have the AI Council and the provinces, because at the federal level, yes, our job is to make the policy, but after 18th Amendment, the provinces have to implement it. So provinces have to be the co-owners of all the data and all the decision policy. So therefore, these are certain interventions, and I think if people have seen the national AI policy, it is based on 6 pillars, and these 6 pillars absolutely sync with what water policy is talking about and how each pillar responds to how like international collaboration can be done, what kind of AI infrastructure is needed for water governance, how the capacity building is to be taken, how you are going to talk about the secure AI ecosystem, which I mentioned that one of the fears is the cybersecurity. So all these six pillars can very much sync with the water policy.
Thank you, Dr. Neil. On the question of sinking, actually, because that's something that's interesting as well, that you spoke about how policy making is done in silos. And if we think about water governance and AI, Pa- we see that Pakistan is heavily investing in digital infrastructure, but not really accounting for the amount of, like, the physical amount of water that will be required. We've already seen a lot of conversations in Africa about the AI centers and the water needed to cool them. So, from your perspective as someone who works very closely with policymakers, how can policy making balance the drive for technological innovation while at the same time protecting scarce water resources in a country like Pakistan, which is so heavily dependent on water?
Uh, See, the first line would be Pakistan is already a water scarce country, right? And now you being in the forefronts working on the Indus Water Treaty work. So you see, you can imagine that the amount of this water governance at the international level, how important it is. So Pakistan should begin by rejecting the idea that digital infrastructure is environmentally immaterial. Because right now we are not talking about it. Now, these data centers are the factories for computation, and they require land, they require your electricity, cooling systems, backup power, and often lots and lots of water resources. So, Pakistan uh, has, like, if you look at, we have approximately, I may be wrong, but approximately, I think we have 30 data centers at the moment. So we need to see that a data center consuming a given volume of water in a water abundant basin has a profound social and environmental impact. So Pakistan's, as I already mentioned, that Pakistan overall in the system faces a severe pressure, and the country's own national water policy, the 2018, it emphasizes on conservation, reuse, and equitable allocation of the competing demands. So therefore, instead of uh, blindly talking about that let's have data centers, we have to evaluate around six variables when we are looking at this conservation. The first one is basically that what is your basin stress? And when I say basin stress, I'm talking about that what is the current and the projected water stress at the actual site, which includes the drought, which includes the climate change scenarios. So this is what you have to test the basin stress. Number two is basically you have to see the water source. And water source is that where the data center is being constructed, will the facility going to be using potable water, surface water, groundwater, recycled municipal wastewater, industrial reuse, or any other source? Because every utility of this kind of source will have a different impact. The third variable that you have to look into is basically the consumption versus the withdrawal. Consumption is that how much water will actually be consumed, mainly through evaporation rather than merely withdrawn and returned. And you have to have a distinction in terms of when you are calculating the water footprints. Then you have to look at the indirect water, that what is the water intensity of electricity supplying the facility. And you see that the last thing is that you have to understand the drought resilience. What happens when public water supplies are restricted? Does the data center have binding or any alternative water plan or not. So Pakistan should establish a water source hierarchy for large AI data centers like we just had the Sky 47, that is, and we need to have the technologies which make sure that the consumption of water is minimized. You need to treat the wastewater, and we should utilize that where it's appropriate. And you can use the groundwater only where the basin level assessment actually demonstrates that it is sustainable to use. And the last one is that portable drinking water supplies for routine evaporative cooling in highly water stressed areas. So once you have this kind of system, then you can actually look into that whether you want to have these data centers or not. Singapore can be a good example for that when we are making these data centers.
Thank you, Dr. Aneel. So, and on just building up on the fact that a number of considerations need to be taken into account when deciding whether a data center needs to be built. On that note, there's the government doing stuff, and then there are also private entities who are involved in this, because Silicon Valley is an example of the impact that private enterprises are having on the AI landscape. So my question would then be that as AI infrastructure expands, do you think that governments should have like a hard line in requiring greater transparency from technology companies regarding their water consumption and environmental impacts? Because there are other industries where the environment impact assessment reports are mandatory, right? But and if so, what might an effective regulatory framework look like? And if we use this, do you think countries like Pakistan would be behind in the race towards AI, because uh, companies will likely go to countries where policies are more favorable and lenient. So, where is the balance in that then?
Okay. So, question with a lot of notes. The first one, should we consider ourselves that we are in the race for AI? At times, I feel that, okay, our racing competitors are China or US. I think then you are in the wrong race, the first one. So it's not a race, as I said. It's more of that whether this AI is improving my productivity, whether this AI is bringing more efficiency because people are the same, processes are the same. Whatever task you were doing in like 1 hour, now you can do it in 30 minutes, right? So that is the first one. Number two, developed countries over the years, we have seen they always love to go in those countries where the environmental laws are weak, where the reporting is not that important, so that they can exploit it. You remember that Bhopal tragedy, the Union Carbide case. Till today, as we talk of 2026, the impacts are there. But as it was US versus India, so still people are the victim. Coming on to the question of that, okay, what about the disclosure of water consumption and the environmental impacts? I would say yes. There has to be a mandatory disclosure, and it is perfectly justified, particularly for the large facilities and especially in the water stressed regions. You see, we think that technology is when we are looking at transparency, it is something a check and it is going to be hampering my progress on that AI trajectory. And that's what US did in the last AI summit that happened in Paris and then in India, that okay, we don't want these regulations, we don't want these ethical dimensions, we don't want these standards, we don't want these reporting, because then the creativity is going to be hampered. I disagree with that. Transparency is not an anti-technology policy. It is what makes differentiated evidence-based regulation possible. Without data, a regulator cannot distinguish a highly efficient facility using reclaimed water from an inefficient facility drawing drinking water in the stressed aquifer. So it's basically that transparency that allows that human judgment that what is right and what is wrong. So uh, when you are looking at that, okay, what kind of recommended infrastructure that Pakistan should be, or what kind of standards, I think what we have to do, there are certain metrics. Number one is that you have to see, or you have to show in that transparency, that what is the total water withdrawal. That is the first metric. It shows the second one is your consumption side, your total water consumption. The third one is that what is the source of water you are using. Then what is the effectiveness of water utility? What is the total electricity that is being needed? What is this electricity source water intensity? Then we can look out the recycled water percentage in it. And then you see that there are seasonal variations. So you see the peak seasonal demand and what is your drought response plan. So in this way, you can actually have a very good data matrix where we can actually see that how you can distinguish that what is an efficient and what is an inefficient data center.
Thank you for that, because this was something that came up in a number of our previous conversations as well. And now, moving on to just my last question, Dr. Aneel, is that when we talk about the regulatory framework, we also talk about what we can learn from other countries, as is done in most policy circles. So, several countries facing water scarcity have adopted innovative regulatory and technological measures to reduce the water footprint of AI data centers. What lessons do you think Pakistan can learn from national experiences, if some of these were used in the AI policy that you chaired? And which approaches do you think are most applicable in our local domestic context?
Okay. So the most relevant international lesson is not one particular cooling technology. It's basically that successful jurisdictions increasingly treat data centers which are resource intensive, infrastructure requiring measurement, efficiency standards, planning, and environmental accountability. And in my previous conversation, I mentioned Singapore about it. What Singapore is, why I say Singapore is very much relevant to Pakistan, because it has combined its ambitions to be a digital AI hub with a very acute land, energy, and water constraints. They have a very hot and humid climate, and its green data center roadmap explicitly recognized that data centers are heavy users of both power and water. So what they're doing is that Singapore uses water usage effectiveness as a central metric. In the previous question, when I was talking about the metering, so it talks about that how the water has to be utilized. Now, what Pakistan can learn from Singapore is that we need to start with mandatory metering and water balances. Pakistan cannot manage what operators and regulators do not accurately measure. A Pakistani water efficiency management plan needs to be modeled conceptually on Singapore's approach, and which is very much highly transferable. After Singapore, what I can see is European Union. And you have seen that EU always take the leads whenever we are talking about the standards, whenever we are talking about the ethical dimensions, whenever we are talking about the environmental sustainability. So you highlighted this issue of standardization, the standards. So European Union gives a very clear emerging models for the standardized reporting. And you can use that framework for measurement, for comparison, for rating, and the standards. So, what Pakistan needs to learn from European Union is that we need to establish a standardized reporting database. If you remember that federated concept that I was talking about, then we have to use the verified data to create the performance classes. And later, you have to make the incentive systems, the expansions, the permits, and that leads you towards the better standards. And one interesting after Singapore, EU, let me take you to Latin America, Chile. You see, Chile offers one of the strongest warnings for water-stressed Pakistan. They have a planned Google data center in Santiago, and that became very much controversial about that. Okay, Santiago is already a very stressed aquifer. So what in 2024, and I think it was early 2024, there was an environmental court which partially reversed the project's permit and required its evaluation that, okay, whether the climate change impacts on the water company. So what Google did, it made an announcement that they are going to rework the project and they are going to use the air-cooled technology rather than the water cooling approach. So there's a different approach of like using this air cooling also. So I think if you look at these three examples, number one was I'm forgetting what was the first one. Singapore. The second one was EU, and the third one was Chile. I think Pakistan have a good learning curve that now when we are on the like on the way of making these data centers and you see that crypto mining and all these such things they requires that. So I think we can actually learn from the experience of these countries that what has to be done and what we should be doing in terms of future when we are making these data centers and we don't commit the same mistakes what other countries are experiencing at the moment.
Thank you, Dr. Aneel. We're going to wrap up in like 10-15 minutes, but we have some questions from the audience. If we can very quickly go through those. So, some does anyone have a question? There was a question in the chat which I can't see.
See, Maham, that question has already been answered, so I deleted it. But I think somebody raised their hand, and
Yeah, Khatija has raised their
yeah,
hand.
yeah.
Khatija,
So
do you want to ask a question?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Firstly, thank you, Maham, and especially Dr. Aneel for such a thought-provoking session. My question to you is that in many parts of the world, rivers cross national borders and data about them is treated as sensitive or even a security matter. Given that, can AI-based water governance actually work at a transboundary scale, or does it just expose the lack of political agreement on data sharing? Thank you.
uh, you see that we have to understand when we are looking at the environmental data, most of the time we are using the GIS. So even sitting here, you can look at what is happening on the other side of the border. So that is one part. But how I infer that uh, countries think that when the data is shared, they become exposed. Now, you see, we are going through a phase where you think that, okay, I'm a complete private person, I don't have any data on the web, but still you have a digital footprint. And how I say that, okay, the moment you enter into the transboundary domain, it means that something is affecting both countries, and both countries may become the victim of that particular problem. So it's not the data, it's the dialogue when you are interacting, when you are sharing your concerns with another country, then that dialogue actually leads to that how the data from both countries can be collected at a standard node and how the data can be used for the common problem to be solved. Call it as climate change, call it as water distribution. I can give you a classic example of Rhine River, which is the water tower of Europe. And you would see that how diplomatically, how the dialogue, how the data was shared. And as we talk of today, that Rhine River is a transboundary water that is being shared by everyone, and there is no conflict. So, can artificial intelligence? Yes, but I think it's more of the interaction because AI itself is not going to start talking to these countries. AI is just going to reveal, and I already mentioned that okay, human judgment is needed, but AI is just going to make the process transparent. It is going to bring more accountability, more governance, but the countries need to talk, the countries need to collaborate in a way that okay, we are looking at a common problem, and by data sharing or by information exchange the problem can be solved. So I think over here I would say human judgment plays much more role as compared to that AI algorithm, which is giving you that projection. And yes, you can use it because it will save your time. It will give you certain scenarios that what kind of scenario is good in terms of when we are dealing with the transboundary issue. So that is important for that.
Thank you, Dr. Aneel. I don't think there's a question from the audience. I had a quick question when you spoke about human oversight in AI as well. Dr. Neil, the other day I was reading a report from the World Economic Forum, and it said that there's something called pay dis- pay surveillance that's coming up, and pay discrimination, where AI actually helps company map people who are in vulnerable situations because of, say, debt, or have a kid in college, or have medical expenses. And so if they're an Uber driver or they're a nurse for hire, AI will particularly target those people and offer them lesser money, as opposed to someone who isn't in that vulnerable situation. And companies have internalized these models, particularly technology companies like Uber and Rideshare and Uber for nurses and stuff. How do you think that, and we've seen that what starts in the West, eventually these apps make their way to make their way home as well. What ethically, there the companies are arguing it is okay because there's nothing illegal about it. It's a private enterprise. They can offer, if as long as it's minimum wage, they can offer less money to one person and more to another. What do you think regulation in this type of situation would look like? Because there are major ethical issues with using data that is private to know that, oh, this is a potential target for cheap labor, basically.
Yes. So you have given the question, but you have answered it yourself because there's a breach of trust. If I am sharing the information that, okay, I'm running through, this is my income, I'm unemployed, and someone take benefit of my vulnerability, it's not ethical, right? Just because I can be compromised, I can be bargained at a lower level wage rate because right now I'm in need of it. So it's a pure exploitation. It's not about the demand and supply. The second one dimension is that have that company taken consent from me that okay, we have created this algo and we are going to put you or connect you with the people who need it right now, but yes, the wage is going to be less. If that is being done, that is informed, so I know that I'm being exploited, I am working at a lower wage because I'm in desperate need of a job. But if it is being done because without my consent, if it is being done that I don't know that how my information is being utilized, because as I said, that now you trust the machine so much that we have stopped talking to our peers, but we think that they are doing the right thing. And as we said, that first we decide and then we start staying with that decision, then we start protecting it, or then we start defending it. It is the same thing that now, given that it's happening in the developed worlds, yes, in no time, someone listens to this question and gets an idea and start this thing in Pakistan also. Why not? Thanks to you. But what happens is it ethical or not? Is it morally correct or not? I think it's not. You still need certain parameters where you draw the line that what is right and what is wrong. And till you are a businessman, till your motive is profit, because it's not that apps are doing some corporate social responsibility, or these apps have the welfare objective, they have a profit objective. So the more they collect data, the more they can exploit people, the more they can tailor their behaviors. So in one way, you are giving your agency of decision making to the machine. And if the machine is doing everything, and machine is putting you from low vulnerability to high vulnerability, and the machine knows that, okay, what is my credit card spending, machine knows what is there, and then they start offering me that kind of jobs where I compromise my respect, where I compromise my previous income. So I think that is not something which is ethical.
Thank you, Dr. Aneel. And I think with that, we will wrap up today's session. The record, for those who are listening, the recording of this will also be available online and on YouTube, and we'll share the link. Thank you so much for taking out time, Dr. Aneel, and becoming a part of our very extensive water governance series, the aim of which is to promote water governance as a career for women in Pakistan and globally as well. And we hope to see the rest of you at our future sessions, which two of them are left. And thank you so much, Dr. Aneel, once again. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay. Bye bye.